to the appointment of Mr. Molefe. To cut the long story short, I'm aware that he was first seconded from Transnet. But I'm more interested on how he became employed as the group chief executive. Can you take the committee through the process?
Thank you, Advocate. Sorry. On the 17th of April, 2015, Mr. Molefe was seconded for a 3-month period to Eskom. As I've said in my statement, you know, within days of Mr. Molefe arriving, as a board member, I must say, I started getting comfort that he had his hands, when I say had his hands around it, let me explain it this way. I think it was a Friday that he started. That Saturday and Sunday, he spent the entire weekend with the entire team, the same team who had been there before. And by the Monday, there was a board meeting whereby he came and briefed the board on his understanding what the challenges were and how he thought, you know, he could go about addressing some of those. I must say, it was my first time in a board meeting at Eskom that I felt that somebody was not talking about a glass half empty, but a glass half full, and what it was that could be done to correct it. And that gave me a lot of courage, or a lot of encouragement, that is. Mr. Molefe's secondment was going to be until the end of June, I think it is. And then sometime in June, there was a letter sent by Ms. Daniels, that's I'm talking about 58, paragraph 58. Ms. Daniels sent a letter to the Minister's office from Dr. Ben, stating that the P&G, which had met in between, and we were looking at to appoint Mr. Molefe on a permanent basis. During that time, as P&G, what we also felt was that we wanted to make sure that we're doing this by the book, because our MOI calls for a nomination of 3 to go to minister, and in this particular case, because we had what we thought was a preferred candidate, we wanted to make sure that it was legally feasible to do. So we got a legal opinion. Which said it was possible. Ms. Daniels, like I said, on the 19th of June, sent a letter to Minister's office, but a few hours after that, Dr. Ben sent a mail on which I was copied to say, look, I think it's premature. You can't ask for Mr. Molefe to be made permanent unless he's at least done 6 months within the job. But so based on that, the letter was withdrawn, and there was a second letter sent to Minister Brown requesting for the extension of Mr. Molefe's secondment for a further 3 months, which then ended end of September.
The secondment ended, but then a process gets to be initiated for him to be appointed permanently. Who initiates this process? How is this process initiated? Does this process take into account the applicable prescripts that regulate the appointment of senior executives?
The legal opinion that we sought was to cover exactly what you've just asked. Is it possible that one can go forward with 1 name versus 3, which is obviously what's requested or called for in the MOI? And the opinion said that it was possible. We needed to then just write to Minister in that regards. Minister, when she gave us the second secondment, also asked us to work on the appointment or the permanent appointment, because we couldn't just roll on their secondments, because I'm sure at Transnet they were having their own challenges as he had been lifted out there. What we then did was we got the opinion, and Minister, in a letter when she approved the second secondment, then also said, can I please have the legal opinion that you said you've already received? Then on the 13th of September, which is almost at the end of the month now, the 13th of September, Ms. Ursula Rutman, who is the head of governance at DPE, writes to us about the legal opinion. And what she asks is whether in the legal opinion that was received, did we take into account the guidelines for appointment of executives, chief executives of state-owned enterprises. Now, what we had done up till then, we'd given all of the Eskom documentation, the MOI, and all of the recruitment documentation, but we had not had that guideline, which Ms. Rutman sent to us. On the 14th, that was on the 13th, on the 14th of September, and I'm now at paragraph 64, we sent that off to our attorneys, Bowman Gilfillan, to ask, how do you do this? And Bowman Gilfillan, then taking that into account as well, comes back and says, if you want to, you can do this, but then you would need to do a deviation for minister's approval. And that was the decision then to do that. If I can just add, on the 9th of September, there was a P&G where the concern around the number of acting roles were highlighted. And the view of P&G at the time was that rather than worry about the P&G acting or the acting roles at Exco, we needed to confirm the CEO and the CFO roles. We couldn't go and appoint people and not have those roles filled. On the meeting, at the board meeting of the 10th of September, P&G put the resolution to the group, to the board, and the board supported that a letter can go to Minister asking for the appointment of Mr. Molefe.
Let's go a bit backwards to paragraph 63. There is a letter dated 27 June 2015 from the Minister in response to an earlier letter addressed to her by Dr. Ngubane. And can you read for the record from the third sentence, the third sentence where the minister requested.
63. Are you talking about the minister ended her letter, that one? Is that what you're asking?
No. It says the minister...
Also requested, okay,
yeah.
all right, got it. Right. The minister also requested that the board deals expeditiously with the process of appointing the new chief executive officer in accordance with the MOI, the Labour Relations Act, the Eskom employment policies and procedures. The minister ended her letter by requesting sight of the full legal opinion and recommendation on the optimal route to follow in the appointment of the chief executive officer.
Now we know that you had proposed a deviation. What was the reason for not following this particular or the normal process for recruiting a group chief executive? Particularly that the shareholder representative seems to be reminding the board of the process.
I think it's safe to say, Advocate Venara, that having come into an organization which was so unstable, and having after a few months seen the turnaround, by August of that month, we'd already started seeing the last of load shedding. This board was really convinced. Well, let me talk for myself, not for the board. I'm sure you'll check with everybody else. I was convinced that based on what we had when we arrived and the fact that we had a clock ticking backwards, which is a 3-year tenure, and the fact that South Africa was suffering load shedding at the cost of 434 million rand a day, circa 434 million rand a day. The fact that we had an individual who came in who seemed to be able to grapple with the issues and turn it so quickly was certainly my motivation, that he was somebody that should be considered for the job.
That motivation must acknowledge its shortcomings. One, that there could possibly have been other better candidates in the market who could do an equally good, if not a better job. Are you prepared to make that concession?
It was possible. It was possible, but if I could just add, Advocate Venara, with everything the board was dealing with at the time, and the fact that we came in, we had the downgrade, as you correctly said, for some decisions that was made previously, I don't think we had margin for error, and we believed that this was the decision, the best decision, given what we had at that time.
Fast forward that decision of yours to where you sit at today, looking backwards at one, the Public Protector's report on state capture, the effect that the report had on your best candidate, with your candidate then stepping down at Eskom, that you are to date, or at least Eskom, and the shareholder are in court battling around issues of his employment at Eskom. You still insist, with the benefit of hindsight, this was the best decision that you people made at the time?
Advocate Venara, what happened with state capture has changed many people's lives, and if there's one thing that I would pray, is that we'd have an opportunity to do a proper inquiry quickly, so that those who are found guilty of wrongdoing must feel the full wrath of the law. Having said that, when it comes to the candidate at the time, the decision that we made was based on what we had in front of us and not what we have today. In fact, everything that I see in the media today just leaves me cold with some of what seems to be going wrong all the time. But we did not have that benefit at that stage. But on state capture, I reiterate, I wish we could get it started immediately or as soon as possible, so that we can find people guilty if there is any wrongdoing, and people will be held accountable for the full extent of the law.